You think you know combat until the person who was supposed to lead you takes a round through the temple before you've even left the wire. Then it's just you, a half-charged radio, and 7 people who have every right to hate your guts because you're not him. This isn't a story about heroism. Heroism is what generals put on medals to sell war bonds. This is a story about not freezing, about making a call that gets someone killed, then making the next call anyway. I'm telling you this because somewhere out there, some lieutenant is getting the news that their captain just stepped on a pressure plate. They're about to feel their soul leave their body for 3 full seconds. I want them to know, those 3 seconds don't mean you're a coward. They mean you're human. What you do in the 4th second, that's the part they don't teach you. The first time I gave an order as commander, I threw up behind a burning Toyota. Not because of the smell, though there was something else, melted rubber, and whatever had been inside the passenger seat before the RPG turned it into a charcoal briquette. I threw up because the man I was replacing was still warm 20 meters away, and his blood had sprayed in a pattern that looked like someone had emptied a bucket of crimson paint across the gravel. Captain Elias Ramiro, 34 years old, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Syria, married, 3 kids, last name stenciled above his left breast pocket. I'd shaken his hand 6 hours earlier. He'd said, "Don't worry, Reyes. You're just here to observe." Observe, right? I wiped my mouth on my sleeve and keyed the radio. Spectre actual to all call signs. Hold position. I need a sit rep from every team now. My voice cracked on now. I didn't care. The gravel tasted like copper and bile. Spectre 2 were pinned behind the eastern wall. 2 wounded, 1 critical. We can't move until that DSHK goes quiet. That was Sergeant First Class Delgado. He'd been in the Army since before I graduated high school. His voice sounded like rocks tumbling down a hill. Spectre 3, we've got eyes on the machine gun. 2nd floor, yellow building with a collapsed roof. We can't get a clean shot. Too many civilians on the ground floor. Specialist Mira Patel. She was the team's designated marksman. 22 years old, barely 130 pounds, and she could put a round through a keyhole at 600 meters. Her parents owned a convenience store in New Jersey. She told me that on the flight over, then asked if I'd ever seen anyone die. I'd lied and said no. Spectre 4 is negative contact, but we're low on ammo. I'm talking less than a mag per man. Corporal Jameson Jams, right? He was our comm specialist and the youngest person in the platoon at 19. He joined to pay for community college. His nickname came from the fact that he'd somehow jammed a grenade launcher during basic training, a feat the instructor said was physically impossible. I looked at the burning Toyota, at Ramiro's body, still visible behind the corner of a half-destroyed pharmacy, at the dust rising from the eastern wall where the DSHK rounds were chewing concrete into powder. Here's what they don't tell you about taking command in a firefight. There's no ceremony, no passing of the guidon, no speech, no moment where everyone salutes and says ma'am with respect in their voices. There's just a body on the ground and 7 people on the radio waiting for someone to stop the world from ending. I was a first lieutenant. I was supposed to be Ramiro's executive officer, which meant I handled logistics, paperwork, and the occasional patrol. I'd never led a combat operation larger than a squad. I never made a decision that got people killed. Until right now. Spectre 3, do you have eyes on the stairwell? I asked. Patel came back after 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. Affirmative. Back of the building, exterior. It's clear, but there's a family huddled in the ground floor room. I can see a kid, maybe 5 years old, peeking through a hole in the wall. I close my eyes. The moral dilemma was already there, waiting for me like a trap I'd walked into hours ago. If I ordered Patel to take the shot on the machine gunner through the floor, the round would go through the ceiling and probably kill the family below. If I didn't take the shot, Delgado's critical wound would become a death within the hour. If I tried to assault the building directly, we'd lose more people crossing the kill zone. Ramiro would have known what to do. Ramiro had 3 deployments and a Bronze Star. I had a degree in supply chain management and a father who'd cried when I told him I was commissioning. Spectre 2, what's the status of your critical? I asked. Garcia. Got shot. He's fading fast. Delgado's voice was flat. I knew what that flatness meant. He was already saying goodbye in his head. Hold on. I pulled up the map on my wrist-mounted tablet. The village was called Mon Al-Qadisiyah. Maybe 200 buildings, most of them mud brick with corrugated steel roofs. We'd come to clear a weapons cache. Instead, we'd driven into an ambush that Ramiro had walked right into like it was a surprise party. No, that wasn't fair. Ramiro had been a good officer. He'd just been unlucky. The sniper had been patient, had waited until Ramiro stepped out from behind the MRAP to light a cigarette. One round, right through the temple. The cigarette had still been in his mouth when he hit the ground. I have an idea, I said. Patel, do you have a clear shot on the wall beneath the machine gun position? Negative. There's a car in the way. But if I move to the north side of my position, I might get an angle. I'd be exposed for about 10 seconds. How exposed? Windows blown out. I'd have to stand in the opening. She might as well have said she'd have to stand naked in the middle of a firing range. The DSHK was 12.7 millimeters. One hit anywhere on her torso, and she wouldn't have a torso anymore. Don't do that, I said. Jams, I need you to patch me through to the drone operator at Battalion. Tell them I need to fly over with audio broadcast capability. On it. Jam's fingers moved across his radio pack. He was sheltered behind a low wall with two other soldiers from Spectre 4. One of them, a private named Okonkwo, was using his helmet to fan smoke away from their position. It wouldn't do anything, but I appreciated the effort. While Jams worked, I did something that felt insane. I stood up. Not all the way. I kept my head below the level of the burning Toyota's hood. But I moved to the edge of the vehicle and looked directly at the yellow building. Second floor. Collapsed roof. The DSHK was mounted on a tripod near a shattered window. I could see the gunner's silhouette, the long shape of the barrel, the belt of ammunition feeding into the receiver. He was wearing a tan shirt and a black vest. I couldn't see his face, but I imagined he was smiling. Why wouldn't he be? He had us pinned, he had the high ground, and he had civilians as human shields. Spectre Actual, I got the drone, Jams said. Battalion says they can have it overhead in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Garcia had maybe 2. Tell them to make it 2, I said. They said I don't care what they said. Tell them I have a dying soldier, and I'm willing to explain to the court-martial why I needed that drone faster than their coffee break. There was a pause. Then Jam's voice came back, and I could hear the grin in it despite everything. They said 2 minutes. They also said you're a pain in the ass, and they're documenting this conversation. Let them document it. Patel, when the drone arrives, I need you to watch the building's roof. There's going to be a secondary position, probably a sniper. Can you spot for me? I can try. What's the drone doing? Distraction. I waited. The DSHK kept firing in bursts. Each burst lasted 3 to 4 seconds, followed by a pause of maybe 10 seconds while the gunner adjusted his aim or reloaded. I counted the rhythm. Burst, pause. Burst, pause. He was methodical, disciplined. This wasn't some local kid with a capture weapon. This was a professional. The drone arrived in 2 minutes and 11 seconds. I know because I counted. It was a small quadcopter, almost silent at altitude. Battalion had fitted it with a loudspeaker for PSYOPs, psychological operations. Usually they used it to broadcast surrender messages or propaganda. I had a different idea. Jams, tell the drone operator to fly directly over the yellow building at 50 meters. Then broadcast this to the gunner on the second floor. We have a wounded soldier. If you stop firing for 5 minutes, we will not assault your position. 5 minutes. That's all we ask. Are you serious? Jams asked. Do it. He did. The drone descended. The loudspeaker crackled. Then my words echoed across the village in Arabic. I'd learned the phrase from the interpreter before we left. I practiced it until my tongue bled. The DSHK stopped firing. Silence. Real silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums like water pressure. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear someone crying in one of the nearby buildings. A child, probably the same one Patel had seen. Then, the gunner's voice came back. Not through the drone. He was shouting from the window. Why should I trust you? I stood up fully. No cover. No concealment. Just me, a first lieutenant with vomit on her sleeve, standing in the open. Because I'm not him, I shouted back. I'm not the commander you shot. I'm someone else. And I'm telling you that if you let us get our wounded, I will not attack you. On my honor. Delgado's voice came over the radio, barely a whisper. Reyes, what the hell are you doing? Buying time. The gunner was silent for a long moment. Then he said 5 minutes. No more. I nodded, even though he probably couldn't see it. Agreed. I keyed the radio. Spectre 2, move your wounded to the MRAP now. Spectre 4, provide cover, but do not engage unless fired upon. Spectre 3, watch that roof. If anyone so much as farts near a weapon, tell me immediately. The next 4 minutes and 30 seconds were the longest of my life. Delgado and his team carried Garcia on a stretcher made from a door and some rope. Garcia was conscious, which was almost worse. His eyes were open, and he was whispering something in Spanish. Praying, maybe, or saying goodbye to his mother. I couldn't tell. The MRAP's engine roared to life. The ramp closed. The vehicle lurched forward and rumbled out of the village, heading for the forward operating base 15 kilometers away. Garcia's loaded, Delgado reported. He's lost a lot of blood, but the medic says he might make it if they drive fast. Then, tell them to drive faster. I turned back to the yellow building. The gunner was still at the window. I could see him more clearly now. A man in his 30s, beard neatly trimmed, eyes that looked tired rather than angry. He was holding a cigarette. The DSHK was silent behind him. 5 minutes, he called down. You kept your word. So did you, I said. Why? He took a drag from his cigarette. Because the last commander, he would have shelled this building. Killed everyone inside. The family, the children. He would have called it collateral damage. You asked for mercy. That is not something I hear often from your people. I didn't know what to say to that. Ramiro had been a good man. He wouldn't have shelled a building full of civilians. But the gunner didn't know that. The gunner only knew what he'd seen, what he'd been told, what the war had taught him to expect. What's your name? I asked. He smiled. It was a sad smile. You would not be able to pronounce it. And if you could, it would not matter. We will fight again, probably tomorrow. But not today. Today, we are both tired. He stepped back from the window. A moment later, the DSHK's barrel withdrew. Then he was gone. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for the bullet that didn't come. Patel reported that the roof was clear. Delgado reported that the eastern wall was secure. Jams reported that Garcia's vitals were stabilizing. Spectre actual to all call signs, I said. We're pulling back to the FOB. Maintain security, but do not engage unless engaged. We've done enough for one day. As we loaded into the remaining vehicles, Patel fell on his step beside me. She was carrying her rifle with the scope still up, scanning the rooftops out of habit. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest, she said. Can it be both? Yeah, I think it can. I climbed into the passenger seat of the lead MRAP. The driver, a specialist named Chun, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe. Or confusion. Or both. You okay, ma'am? He asked. I thought about Ramiro. About the cigarette still in his mouth. About the way his blood had sprayed across the gravel like someone emptying a bucket of paint. No, I said. But I will be. The MRAP lurched forward. Behind us, the yellow building grew smaller and smaller until it was just a smudge on the horizon. I didn't look back. I'd learned that lesson from Ramiro. Never look back at the dead. They don't need your eyes. They need your memory. And I would remember. Every detail. Every second. Every decision. That was the burden. That was the job. That was what it meant to be the commander. We buried Garcia 3 days later. Not in the ground. We were still in theater, so buried meant a ceremony in the FOB's chapel, which was really just a Konex box with some folding chairs and a wooden cross someone had carved from an ammunition crate. Garcia had made it to the surgical unit, but his intestines had been too shredded. The doctors had done their best. Their best hadn't been enough. I stood at the back of the Konex box, watching the chaplain speak words I couldn't hear. My ears were still ringing from the ambush. The doctor said it was temporary. I wasn't sure I believed her. Delgado was sitting in the front row, his broad shoulders hunched. He'd been Garcia's squad leader for 2 years. They'd joined the army together, gone through basic together, deployed together 3 times. Delgado had a wife and 2 kids back in Texas. Garcia had a fiancée who was supposed to meet him in Hawaii next month for their honeymoon. I hadn't slept in 72 hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the gunner's face. His tired eyes. His sad smile. The way he'd said, "We are both tired," like it was the truest thing anyone had ever said. After the ceremony, Patel found me behind the supply tent. I was sitting on a crate of MREs, staring at nothing. "You should eat something," she said. "Not hungry." That's not what I asked. I looked up at her. She was wearing her uniform like armor, all sharp creases and polished boots. But her eyes were red. She'd been crying. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I'm not the one who made a deal with the enemy and then watched one of my soldiers die anyway. The words hit like a punch to the chest. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because she was right. I made a deal. I trusted the gunner. And Garcia had still died. That's not fair, I said finally. No, it's not. Patel sat down on the crate next to me. But neither is any of this. You did what you thought was right. So did Garcia. So did Ramiro. And now Ramiro's dead, and Garcia's dead, and we're still here eating MREs and waiting for the next ambush. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to know that I'm not blaming you. None of us are. But we need you to stop blaming yourself, because if you fall apart, we all fall apart. And I'm not ready to fall apart yet. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I started to cry. Not a lot. Just a few tears, leaking out of the corners of my eyes like water from a cracked pipe. I wiped them away quickly, but Patel saw. Of course she saw. She was a sniper. She didn't miss anything. It's okay, she said quietly. We've all cried. Even Delgado. Especially Delgado. I don't want them to see me like this. Then, don't let them. Cry here. Cry now. Then, put your face back on and lead us tomorrow. I nodded. Took a breath. Let it out. What about the gunner? I asked. The man in the yellow building. Do you think he knew Garcia would die anyway? Patel considered the question. I think he knew that Ward doesn't care about deals. I think he gave us 5 minutes because you asked for mercy, and mercy is rare. But mercy doesn't stop bullets. It just delays them. That's bleak. That's reality. We sat in silence for a while. The sun was setting behind the FOB's perimeter wall, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the thump of artillery. The war was still happening. It didn't stop for funerals. Jams has been trying to raise you on the radio for the past hour, Patel said eventually. He says battalion wants a full after-action report by 0600 tomorrow. Also, your father called the FOB switchboard. He wants to know why you haven't emailed him. I almost laughed. Almost. What did Jams tell him? That you were in a meeting. Which is technically true. You were meeting with grief. You're weird, Patel. I know. That's why you keep me around. She stood up, brushed off her uniform, and offered me her hand. I took it. She pulled me to my feet with surprising strength for someone so small. Come on, she said. Delgado's cooking something in the mess tent. It smells like actual food, not MREs. And Jams found a bottle of whiskey somewhere. Don't ask me where. I don't want to know. I can't drink. I have to write that report. The report can wait. Garcia can't. She paused. That's not what I meant. I meant we need to remember him. All of us. Together. That's what the whiskey is for. I followed her to the mess tent. Inside, the scene was almost normal. Delgado was standing over a portable stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like chili. Jams was sitting at a table with Okonkwo and Chun playing cards. A bottle of Jack Daniels sat in the middle of the table, half empty already. When I walked in, everyone looked up. For a moment, I felt like an intruder. Like I was crashing a party I hadn't been invited to. Then, Delgado nodded at me and said, "Grab a bowl, ma'am. It's not fancy, but it's hot." I got a bowl. I sat down at the table. Jams poured me 2 fingers of whiskey without asking. To Garcia, he said, raising his cup. To Garcia, we all echoed. We drank. The whiskey burned going down, but in a good way. A human way. Tell us about the after-action report, Delgado said. What are you going to say? I thought about it. About Ramiro. About the gunner. About the 5 minutes of mercy that hadn't been enough. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. I'm going to say that I made a call. That it was the right call at the time. That Garcia died anyway because his wound was too severe, not because I hesitated or because the gunner broke his word. And if battalion disagrees? Chun asked. Then, battalion can court-martial me. But they won't. How do you know? I looked around the table at my team. Delgado, with his rock-slide voice and his quiet strength. Patel, with her sniper's eyes and her brutal honesty. Jams, with his jammed grenade launcher and his loyalty. Okonkwo, who fanned smoke with his helmet. Chun, who drove like a maniac but had never once complained. Because I have the best damn team in the army, I said. And battalion knows that if they lose us, they lose this sector. Delgado smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile since Ramiro died. That's the Reyes I've been waiting for, he said. That night, I wrote the after-action report. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I wrote exactly what happened, including the deal I'd made with the gunner and the 5 minutes of silence. I wrote that Garcia had died despite our best efforts, not because of any failure of leadership or courage. I filed the report at 0550, 10 minutes before the deadline. Then, I walked outside to watch the sunrise. The sky was the color of a bruise, purple and yellow and red all mixed together. Somewhere to the east, beyond the mountains, the sun was climbing over the horizon. Another day, another chance to get it right. My radio crackled. Jam's voice. Spectre Actual, we've got movement on the eastern ridge. Thermal shows at least a dozen contacts. They're carrying weapons. I keyed the mic. Spectre 2, 3, 4. Battle stations. This is not a drill. The words came out steady. Strong. Like I've been saying them my whole life. Delgado's voice. Spectre 2. Moving to position. Patel's voice. Spectre 3. I have eyes on the ridge. Confirming weapons. RPGs and small arms. Jam's voice. Spectre 4. Ready to provide comm support. Also, I made coffee. It's terrible, but it's hot. I almost laughed. Almost. Save me a cup, I said. I'm going to need it. I started walking toward the perimeter wall. Behind me, the sun finally broke over the mountains, flooding the valley with light. Ahead of me, the enemy was waiting. I was scared. Of course I was scared. Any soldier who says they're not scared is either lying or dead. But I wasn't frozen anymore. The 3 seconds were over. This was the 4th second, and I was ready. The firefight lasted 6 hours. I won't describe all of it because war is mostly waiting, punctuated by screaming, and the waiting is the part that breaks you. But I'll tell you the important parts. At 0715, the contacts on the ridge opened fire. They had mortars this time, 81 millimeters, Chinese-made, accurate enough to drop rounds inside the FOB's perimeter. The first round landed 50 meters from the mess tent. The second round hit the motor pool, destroying 2 Humvees and killing a mechanic named Sergeant Yu who'd been sleeping in the cab of a cargo truck. I was at the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, when the mortars started falling. The TOC was a reinforced bunker with sandbags stacked 3 layers thick on the roof. It smelled like sweat and burnt coffee and fear. Spectre Actual to all call signs. Report casualties, I said into the radio. Delgado came back first. Spectre 2, negative casualties, but we're pinned behind the eastern wall. Mortars are walking toward our position. Patel, Spectre 3, I'm in the watchtower. I have a clear shot on the mortar team. But there's a problem. What problem? They're using a school bus as cover. There are children inside. I can see them through the windows. I close my eyes. There was again the moral dilemma, the trap that kept springing shut on my conscience. Can you take the shot without hitting the bus? I asked. Negative. The mortar tube is set up directly behind the bus. Any round that misses the gunner hits the bus. And even if I hit the gunner, the bus is still in the line of fire for our return fire. I thought about Garcia, about the 5 minutes of mercy, about the gunner's tired eyes. Hold your fire, I said. I'm going to try something. I grabbed Jams and pulled him aside. I need you to patch me through to the drone again. Same as before. You're going to negotiate with the mortar team? I'm going to try. Jams looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Ma'am, with respect, that didn't work last time. Garcia still died. Garcia died because he was shot before I made the deal. The deal didn't kill him. The bullet killed him. And if this deal gets more of us killed? I didn't have an answer for that, so I didn't give one. I just waited while Jams raised the drone operator. The drone was overhead in 90 seconds. I gave the same order, fly over the mortar position, broadcast on loudspeaker. But this time, I didn't ask for ceasefire. To the mortar team behind the school bus, I said into the microphone, I see the children inside. I know you're using them as shields. I'm not going to shell your position because of those children. But I'm going to give you one warning. Withdraw now, or I will send a different kind of message. The drone broadcast my words. Then we waited. A minute passed. 2 minutes. The mortars kept falling. One landed near the watchtower, sending Patel diving for cover. She came back on the radio, voice shaking. That was close. Too close. I know, I said. I'm sorry. Then, the mortar team's leader appeared at the door of the school bus. He was holding a child, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with dark hair and terrified eyes. He put a pistol to her head. The drone's camera feed showed it all in grainy black and white. I watched the girl's mouth open in a silent scream. I watched the mortar team leader smile. You see, He shouted up at the drone. You will not fire. You cannot fire. Because if you fire, you kill the children. And we know you will not kill children. We know you are weak. I felt something snap inside me. Not my temper, something deeper. Something that had been building since Ramiro fell. Jams, I said quietly, get me Delgado. He's on the line. Delgado, do you still have that Mark 19? The Mark 19 was an automatic grenade launcher. It fired 40mm grenades at a rate of 300 rounds per minute. It could turn a school bus into confetti. Affirmative, Delgado said. But the bus, I know about the bus. I'm not going to use it on the bus. I'm going to use it on the ridge behind the bus. The mortar team's escape route. You're going to trap them? I'm going to give them a choice. Either they let the children go and withdraw to the north, or they stay where they are, and we cut off their only exit. They'll run out of ammunition eventually. And when they do, I'm going to walk up to that bus and pull that little girl out myself. There was a long pause. Then Delgado said, that's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. I love it. I gave the order. Delgado's team opened fire with a Mark 19, not at the bus, but the ridge behind it. The grenades exploded in a wall of fire and smoke, collapsing the only road the mortar team could use to escape. On the drone feed, I watched the mortar team leader's smile disappear. He looked at the burning ridge. He looked at the children in the bus. He looked at the pistol in his hand. Then, he let the little girl go. She ran, not toward the mortar team, toward the FOB. Toward us. I saw her small legs pumping, her arms flailing, her mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear, but could feel in my bones. Patel, I said, cover her. If anyone shoots at that girl, you have my permission to put a round through their face. With pleasure, Patel said. The little girl reached the FOB's outer wall. Chun and Okonkwo ran out to meet her, pulling her behind cover. She was crying. She was alive. The mortar team didn't fire again. They didn't withdraw, either. They just stood there, trapped between the burning ridge and the children they tried to use as shields. I keyed the radio one more time. To the mortar team, your escape route is gone. Your shields are gone. You have two choices, surrender or die. You have 5 minutes. 3 minutes later, they surrendered. All 12 of them. They walked out of the school bus with their hands up, their weapons on the ground, their faces blank with defeat. Delgado's team secured them without firing a single shot. The firefight was over. I walked outside the TOC into the morning light. The sun was high now, burning away the last of the dawn colors. The air smelled like smoke and cordite and something else, something that might have been hope. Patel was leaning against the watchtower's ladder, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She looked exhausted but alive. That was a good call, she said. Which one? All of them. The grenades. The warning. Letting the girl run to us. She paused. You're not Ramiro. You're not trying to be. That's why it worked. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. I just stood there, breathing in the smoke and the cordite and the hope. Jams ran up to me, holding a piece of paper. Message from battalion, ma'am. They read your after-action report. They're recommending you for a commendation. I don't want a commendation. Too bad. You're getting one anyway. He grinned. Also, your father called again. He says he's proud of you. I told him you were in another meeting. What kind of meeting? The kind where you save a little girl's life. I looked at the school bus. The children were being led out by our medics, wrapped in blankets, given water and food. The little girl who'd run to us was sitting on the hood of a Humvee, drinking from a canteen. She looked up and saw me watching. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. I walked over to her, knelt down, so I was at eye level. What's your name? I asked. She whispered something in Arabic. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. You're safe now, I said. No one is going to hurt you. She reached out and touched my face. Her hand was small and warm and trembling. Thank you, she said, in English. I didn't ask how she knew the words. I didn't ask where she'd learned them. I just took her hand in mine and held it. Behind me, I heard Delgado's voice. Spectre Actual, we've secured the mortar team and the children. What are your orders? I looked at the little girl, and my team, at the burning ridge and the surrendered enemy and the sun climbing higher into the sky. Get everyone back to the FOB, I said. We're done here. And then I stood up, brushed off my knees, took one last look at the school bus. Then we figure out how to get these children somewhere safe, somewhere the war can't find them. Delgado was quiet for a moment. Then he said, That's a good order, ma'am. That's a really good order. I walked back to the TOC. The little girl followed me, her hand still in mine. I didn't tell her to let go. I didn't want her to. The war wasn't over. It would never be over, not really. There would always be another ambush, another mortar team, another moral dilemma waiting to tear me apart. But for this moment, for this single, shining moment, we had one. Not because we'd kill more of them than they'd killed of us. Not because we had better weapons or better tactics or better technology. We had one because we hadn't forgotten what we were fighting for. A little girl with dark hair and terrified eyes. A soldier who died with a cigarette in his mouth. A commander who never meant to be the commander. That was the fourth second. That was every second after. And I was ready for all of them.